I gripped my phone tighter and moved away from my desk at work to find a quiet corner in the hallway. "What do you mean you cancelled the reservation?" I demanded. "The engagement party was this Saturday we had sent out." "My parents cancelled my engagement party because they felt my fiancé wasn't good enough, and now they're desperate to win him over." I could feel my face flushing with rage as Jenna, my mother, responded, "We just can't justify spending that much on a party. We'll find something more appropriate. The venue was simply too expensive weeks ago," Jenna said, her voice carrying the practiced calm she used when delivering disappointing news. "Your father and I discussed it," she went on. "I've been looking at some charming restaurant back rooms that would be perfectly suitable. We already put down a deposit." I interrupted. "How much could you possibly be saving by cancelling now?" A telling pause followed. "Dreams need to align with reality, dear. I had discussed holding important celebrations there since I was 16. I ended the call shortly after promising to discuss it later, knowing that the decision had already been made. "My name is Jenna Whitfield, and I am 29 years old. It was stated that it's about setting reasonable expectations for your future with David's background. Perhaps it's better to start with something more modest. I have spent my adult life demonstrating that I could succeed on my own, despite having wealthy parents in Cincinnati's upscale Amberley Village neighborhood. I developed a lucrative career in architectural design without my father's help, purchased my own condo without using any of my trust funds, and fell in love with David Chen, a talented software developer who had nothing growing up but succeeded, exceptional of himself, even if my parents were blind to his modest attire and humble manner. All I wanted was one day, one ideal celebration, where David and I could announce our engagement in front of our loved ones in a setting that felt unique. However, my parents had taken that away with only a week's notice. My sister Vanessa's mom just told me about Riverside, so I'm sorry. That there is a bright side. She's upgrading my birthday venue to make up for the family embarrassment." I stared at the message 3 times before it finally hit me that they hadn't cancelled because of the expense, but rather because they were embarrassed. Growing up in the Whitfield family meant realizing that appearances were more important than anything else. My father established Cincinnati's largest commercial real estate firm through relationships he made on golf courses and at charity galas. And somehow that wasn't even the worst part. My sister's birthday fell the weekend after our postponed engagement party. Vanessa flourished in this setting, 2 years younger than me, embracing the family legacy, dating only men from suitable backgrounds, and pursuing a law degree not out of passion, but because it was expected of her. Mother served on the boards of the city's most prominent cultural institutions, making sure our family name appeared in all the appropriate society columns. One chose a different route in college, volunteering to design community centers in underprivileged neighborhoods rather than joining my mother's sorority. After graduation, I turned down my father's offer of a corner office at Whitfield Properties and joined a small, creative company. I became the daughter my parents had always wanted, polished, predictable, and perfectly aligned with their values. Every decision I made at the sustainable design architectural firm made us more distant from one another. But I felt my parents respected me for paving my own path, even if they didn't understand it. Then, at a tech conference, I was giving a presentation on smart building design, and David, who was modest in his worn jeans and basic button-down shirt, asked the most perceptive questions. After 6 months of dating, I took David home for dinner. The evening was tense as my parents asked pointed questions about his education. A state school on campus. We talked for hours about incorporating technology into architectural spaces. And then we went to a nearby coffee shop. He was brilliant, kind, and refreshingly genuine, qualities that I had found in short supply within my parents' social circle. When David mentioned that he still drove his college car, a 15-year-old Honda that ran flawlessly, my father barely disguised his disapproval. "Well, at least he's resourceful," my mother had whispered to me later that night, as if thrift were an exotic trait, and she was attempting to be open-minded. Scholarship and his family were middle class. His father was a high school teacher, and his mother was a nurse. When David proposed 6 months later with a simple but meaningful ring he designed himself, my parents gave me lukewarm congratulations and immediately suggested a lengthy engagement just to be because I had decided they simply needed time to see the man I saw and appreciate his bright mind and generous heart, rather than obsessing over his bank account or pedigree. I'm positive that my father said, marriage is a lifetime commitment. You want to know someone completely before taking that step. In reality, he was hoping that I would change my mind and find someone better, but in hindsight, I should have recognized the warning signs that the engagement party they had reluctantly agreed to host was never intended to actually. 3 days after the cancellation, I made an unexpected visit to my parents' house. I had been avoiding their calls because I needed time to process my anger before confronting them. But as I pulled into the curved driveway, I saw additional cars parked. Outside my sister's BMW, my father's business partner's Range Rover, and my aunt's Mercedes. My mother was pointing enthusiastically to what looked like a table arrangement as we gathered in the sunroom around catering samples and floral arrangements. The riverside terrace has such lovely natural light, she said, adding, and with a head table positioned here overlooking the river. What is this? My voice broke through the happy conversation, and 5 heads turned toward me in surprise. First, recover. Jenna, we were just completing some preparations for Vanessa's birthday celebration at the riverside terrace when an awkward silence fell. It wasn't a question, but my aunt suddenly became very interested in her phone, and my father's business partner whispered something about a call he needed to make, so Vanessa at least had the excuse. Despite my inner turmoil, I managed to look dignified as I said, I told Mom it was too soon after your situation, but she insisted. The venue was perfect and already available, and Vanessa responded, available because you cancelled my reservation. My father stood straightening his golf shirt, and I said, Jenna, let's talk about this privately because everyone here already knows what. It's not that easy, sweetie. My mother started her society smile in place with the guest list we've cultivated for Vanessa's event, and the riverside makes perfect sense with the connections your father can foster there. That's why you cancelled my engagement party, saying it was too expensive, and then reserved the exact same venue for Vanessa's birthday. My father interrupted. Look, Jenna, we've been patient with this phase of yours. The job at that small firm, the modest apartment, and now David? And my guests weren't important enough. My celebration wasn't worth it. That's not what your mother is saying. What's my fiancé involved in this? I said in a stern voice. He's just not suitable. My mother finally said, not for someone with your background. He's nice enough, but he has no ambition, no family connections, nothing to offer except love, respect, and support. My parents exchanged a look that I had seen too many times before, the one that preceded some difficult truth they felt obligated to share for my own good. I had suspected their disapproval, but hearing it said so bluntly in the middle of party preparations for my sister, but not for me, shocked me to my core. My father sighed heavily, saying, your fiancé isn't good enough for this family, Jenna, and deep down you know it. We're simply trying to save you from making a mistake you'll regret. I left without saying anything, my head reeling, having finally seen my parents' conditional love, shallow values, and unwavering belief that they knew best. They had rejected and judged the man I loved without ever really knowing him. And for the first time, I questioned whether they knew me either. That night, I sat in my condo with David, tears streaming down my face as I wiped my eyes and said, I thought family mattered more than money. And he listened quietly, his face more sad than angry. When I finished, he took my hands in his. I'm sorry they hurt you, he said softly, but I'm not surprised by how they feel about me. A dejected smile. I don't fit your parents' standards of worth, and some people can only see value in things they already understand. His cool acceptance just strengthened my resolve to throw our own engagement celebration. I abruptly proposed an idea that was straightforward but impactful. We don't need the riverside terrace or their approval. David paused. Are you sure? This is your family, Jenna. I don't want to be the reason you cut ties with them. You're not the reason. I reassured him that their behavior was please let's do this our way. Over the course of the following 2 days, I put my herd into action, reached out to friends, created digital invitations, and located a charming rooftop venue at a nearby brewery. When Vanessa called on Friday morning, she announced without preamble, Mom invited the Hendersons to my party, referring to Jonathan Henderson's family. It was a lovely event that reflected who we truly were rather than who my parents believed we should be. The fact that Jonathan was Vanessa's ex-boyfriend made my stomach drop. The invitation made perfect sense. They were trying to arrange a reunion, and she says it's because his father is thinking of investing in Dad's new venture. The son of a prominent banking family, whom my parents had adored, was devastated when Vanessa broke up with him last year. To date Brad, a pharmaceutical sales representative, whom they considered beneath her. Vanessa went on, but we both knew what she was doing. Now, she told Brad that the party was cancelled because of family matters, but in reality she hadn't invited him. I closed my eyes, realizing the pattern she was following. I'm their golden child. Remember, they're not cancelling my party. They're just trying to control who I. For a brief moment, I thought I had found an ally. But Jenna, I'm truly sorry about what they said to you about David. It was cruel and unfair, and it was the closest Vanessa had ever come to publicly criticizing our parents. Why don't you and David join us at your own engagement party? Bring Brad along and we'll celebrate right in front of them. I suggested with warmth to the when she finally said, Dad's announcing my promotion to junior partner at the firm during the party. I've worked 3 years for this, Jenna, and I can't jeopardize it even for you. The line fell silent at the thought of this small rebellion. The familiar disappointment sank into my chest. So you'll let them manipulate your life as long as there's... Look, not all of us can afford to burn bridges with the family, Jenna. Some others have practical considerations. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and stared at the half-finished invitations on my computer screen. Even though I could now host my own party, my little act of independence felt hollow. What about Brad? I'll make it up to him. David discovered me in this state an hour later, my engagement ring gleaming in the light as I twisted it around my finger, wondering if I was fighting a battle I couldn't win. On Saturday morning, the day of what should have been our engagement party, I woke up to the thought that my family and I would still be celebrating across town without me continuing. As if my feelings and decisions didn't matter. I was thinking, maybe we should go to Vanessa's party. When I joined David, who was already dressed and drinking coffee on our tiny balcony, I almost choked on my first coffee sip. Why would we subject ourselves to that? He said thoughtfully. Because running away and hosting our own party feels like admitting they've won. They will treat you horribly if we don't let them control our behavior, which is standing our ground. I warned that they would make crude remarks and act as though you're invisible. David shrugged, thinking that I'm already unworthy. What could possibly go wrong? By the time we got to the Riverside Terrace that evening, I had gotten myself into such a bad mood that my mother saw us first. Her practiced smile faltering for a moment before she composed herself and glided over to Jenna. My hands were shaking. The venue was gorgeous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Ohio River and crystal chandeliers, casting a warm glow over elegant table settings and flower arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Surprised, she lowered her voice and said, "Darling, this is a private family event. We didn't send you an invitation." I know I said something similar to her gentle tone, but I added steel to my voice, so it was obvious where I stood. Nevertheless, Vanessa is still my sister, and I'm here to support her. The smile on my mother's face intensified. You were very mature, of course. Just remember that tonight is about celebrating Vanessa, so try not to let it become about your circumstances. As she moved away to greet other guests, David squeezed my hand. You okay? I shall fulfill my pledge. Even though I was losing confidence, the evening went horribly wrong for my father. The Henderson family, especially Jonathan, who had sat next to Vanessa despite her obvious discomfort, hardly acknowledged us. David was served last at dinner and was frequently confused for a waiter by my parents' friends. The last blow came during my father's toast, when he stood at the head table with the champagne flute raised and grinned. He declared that Vanessa has demonstrated dedication to family tradition, professional excellence, and creating the right connections for a successful future. His eyes moved meaningfully from Vanessa to Jonathan Henderson before continuing, and I'm proud to say that tonight at Vanessa, we're celebrating more than just a birthday. We're celebrating a remarkable young woman who embodies the Whitfield values. Declare that Vanessa has been promoted to junior partner at Whitfield Properties, where she will assist in leading our exciting new venture with Henderson Financial Group. I sat stunned, not understanding that this was not merely a professional announcement, or even a birthday celebration, but rather a planned business merger between families that would tie Vanessa and Jonathan together through their parents' businesses, making it more and more difficult for her to choose her own path. Suddenly, with a sudden clarity, I realized that this was not about David's lack of ability, but rather about control and keeping the Whitfield dynasty on their terms. As realization set in, I felt David tense next to me, and as I followed his gaze, I saw my father deeply. I was talking to a stranger who kept looking at us. His expression changed from one of disbelief to something like, "Oh," so I whispered, "Who is that man, Robert Maxwell?" He replied, "He's the CEO of Pinnacle Tech." Before I could ask why the CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the nation would be interested in us, David was already standing, and as we snuck out, I got a final glimpse of Robert Maxwell dragging my father apart and pointing toward us with a decided intensity. I didn't know what it was yet, but I could see that something had changed. "Are you going to tell me what that was about?" As we drove home, I inquired, observing David's tense jaw in the light of the "Remember that project I've been working on for the past 3 years, the one I couldn't talk much about, the algorithm for predictive analysis in healthcare, the one that's coming along whenever you ask about it," he said, letting his shoulders relax a little as the dashboard lights came on. I had always assumed it was a normal startup and respected his privacy over his business confidentiality. David looked at me with a roguish smile as he said, "I've finished, Jenna. The development, the testing, everything." I blinked as I processed the news, which is incredible, but what does it have to do with what happened tonight? Robert Maxwell's company is purchasing my software, and the deal closes on Monday morning. Before I could continue, my phone exploded with notifications. 3 missed calls from my father, 2 from my mother, and a text from Vanessa. "What the hell did your fiancé do? Dad and Maxwell are going crazy." Implications began to set in. "Is it a big deal?" David's laugh held no humor. "Pinnacle Tech doesn't make small acquisitions." To get me caught up, David took out his laptop when we got home and showed me the press release that was supposed to be sent out Monday morning. My eyes widened when I read, "Pinnacle Tech acquires BioPredict for $175 million. And I looked up from the screen, gasping. "This is life-changing," David said, nodding, "which is why I've been so distracted lately with the negotiations. I wanted to tell you, but the confidentiality agreements were unbreakable until the deal closed." My mind was racing, and Robert Maxwell recognized you tonight, which is why he was speaking to my father. David, I assume, ran a hand through his hair, indicating that he assumed your father already knew who I was. Just then, my phone rang once more. When he said, "Unusually different, is David with you?" I hesitated, but then I answered on speaker. "Jenna, it's almost midnight, Dad." I said, "Cool. What opportunity could possibly be so urgent?" After a pause, Robert Maxwell said that David's company has developed some extraordinary healthcare technology. Whitfield Properties is entering the medical office space, and we would be very interested in talking about possible partnerships. An hour ago, my father couldn't have bothered to acknowledge David's existence, but now that he saw a business opportunity, he was scurrying to get in touch. In fact, I mentioned that a plan was developing in my head. "I would love to talk more about this. How about brunch at the Riverside Terrace tomorrow, say, at 11 a.m.? My father readily agreed, promising to make the arrangements right away. After hanging up, David looked at me curiously, asking, "Are you absolutely sure?" I replied, my resolve growing stronger. If they want to talk. I never wanted my job or money to matter in our relationship, which is why I drive an old car and wear simple clothes. I wanted to be valued for my ideas, not my bank account, and I do. They can do business with you where our engagement party should have been, and they can face you exactly as you are, not who they assumed you were. David smiled, but his expression remained concerned. "Jenna," I told him that I valued him, but tomorrow isn't about the money. It's about demonstrating to my parents the negative effects of making snap judgments about others and about regaining our dignity on our own terms. As we were getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from my father, who confirmed that we were having brunch at the Riverside Terrace private room. We were looking forward to talking about this wonderful opportunity. Today, my parents arrived first, their Sunday best faces carefully arranged in welcoming expressions. The riverside terrace looked different in daylight, less imposing, more transparent, sunlight streaming through the windows casting long rectangles of light across the polished floors. David set the stage for our own version of Justice. In a small act of defiance, Vanessa brought Brad with her, seemingly out of curiosity. I quietly thanked David, and I went in last. He was dressed in the same basic button-down shirt and jeans that he had worn when we first met, a conscious decision we discussed that morning. I dress professionally but modestly, and my name is Architect Jenna, not Whitfield Aries Jenna David. It's great to see you again, my father boomed, reaching out his hand with renewed zeal. Robert Maxwell says that your work is excellent, so thank you for setting this up. David responded courteously, his manner unaltered from all of my previous interactions with my parents. He was respectful but unimpressed by their position. We sat at the table, mimosas and coffee came, and when my father finally paused for a breath, I put a folder with a copy of the acquisition on the table. My mother nodded along with my father's clearly prepared speech about exciting synergies and mutual opportunities, occasionally touching David's arm to emphasize a point. This was the same David she couldn't be bothered to speak to directly a week earlier. I calmly said, I think we should be clear about what we're discussing before we go further. I opened the folder and turned it to face my parents. David isn't just developing healthcare technology. He founded BioPredict, which Pinnacle Tech is acquiring tomorrow for $175 million. My father's face went pale as he scanned the document my mother's. I think I went on to say that Whitfield Properties actually approached Pinnacle last year about partnering on their medical campus and were rejected. Isn't that right, Dad? The silence that followed was deafening. My father cleared his throat, letting his composure slip for possibly the first time in his professional life. Her eyes darted between David and the paper, and her smile froze. David acknowledged that the extent of his involvement was impressive, and my mother recovered more quickly. You should have told us all this time, but she trailed off when she realized there was no proper way to finish that sentence. I suggested that he wasn't good enough because he drives an old Honda and doesn't flaunt his wealth or connections, just like Vanessa did, staring at David with fresh eyes while waiting for BioPredict Brad to apply for a job there last year. They're very picky, and Brad nodded sheepishly. I didn't make it past the second interview because there were too many qualified applicants, and David hires people based on their character and skills, not their connections or lineage. I explained that this was a novel idea, but the implications were beginning to sink in. I looked at David, who gave me a stern look, and he said, maybe we could start fresh and host a proper engagement party for you both at the riverside. Of course, no expense spared. They had cancelled the engagement and attempted to undermine the celebration based on shallow and incorrect assumptions about worth. A slight nod of encouragement was given. That won't be necessary, I replied. We're celebrating next Saturday on the rooftop of the Mill Creek Brewery in a meaningful way with those who have always been there for us. I got up from my chair and went on, I came so you would understand what you're dealing with, not to apologize or change your mind about what's important. Lost with your judgment, not just a daughter who required you to see beyond your own limited notion of value, but also a successful son-in-law. I took David's hand as I left the riverside. For the second and last time, Terrace letting my parents think about the price of their flimsy standards.